Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm excited, delighted, privileged to welcome not just a very, very close friend from the YPO, but someone who has achieved and accomplished a lot in the world of corporate finance and tax, Mr. Jairaj Purandare from Mumbai, India. Jay, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Arjun.
Uh, Jay is the founder chairman of JMP Advisors Private Limited, which is a leading advisory, accounting, tax, and regulatory services firm based in Mumbai, India. He's the former regional managing partner of PwC. He's the former chairman of Ernst & Young India. He has also been the country head of the tax and advisory practice of Anderson India. And as I mentioned, he's a fellow member of the YPO. Today, we're going to talk with Jay about the budget for 2025, which is something which he does every year. And today he's agreed to speak to The Brand Called You. So, Jay, let's start with the first question. Uh, the budget always evokes a lot of excitement amongst everybody in India. What are some of the key highlights of the Indian budget in 25-26, and how does this compare to the previous years?
Sure. I think really looking forward to the budget again, as usual this year.
Hmm.
We all hope that it's going to unfold some magic for us. And this year, perhaps she did, in one swoop, in the last ball, six, if you like. She was traipsing along with her usual policy announcements and spends and trust areas and whatnot. And she took everybody by surprise with the huge increase in the tax rebate from 7 lakhs going right up to 12 lakhs. So that was great news for the middle class in particular, I think. And that was quite unexpected. So a lot of the other things were broadly along expected lines. But this one clearly, was a ball she hit for six. So very welcomed move, that part. She's also revised the slab rates, which also has, made it more effective for some of the smaller income earners. So that's good news for them. An important announcement as part of the budget has been the new income tax bill, which is proposed to be introduced in Parliament in the next few days. And we're really hoping a lot from it. So I hope they don't disappoint us on that count. But several other changes in the budget, huge thrust in a few areas. And she's, of course, talked of reforms being the fuel for growth. Focus on the youth, on the poor, on women, and on agriculture and on investments. So not unexpected, lots of good things there when we can get into a bit more detail as we go on. But on the tax side of things, there are also some very good changes that have been announced. Mergers and acquisitions are being held up because the NCLT is taking months. I mean, depending on where you are, it can take many, many months, maybe a year before you get NCLT approval. So she's promised to speeden up this process, and that's, I think, very good news. There's a lot of litigation on transfer pricing in India.
Correct.
In fact, we are known to be the largest litigators in transfer pricing. She's trying to settle some of that by bringing in safe harbor rules, which are broader in scope, and trying to apply the arm's length price for a 3-year period rather than every year after. So lots of good things. I think one key change that I see in this budget is the focus on electronics and semiconductors. And they're actually encouraging people who have the technology and the skills to provide those services to registered electronic companies in India and just get away with what I would call a presumptive tax, which is at 25%. But that's really makes them, not have to comply with a host of things. So that's good news, I think. A reduction in various custom duty rates, again, signaling the world that we are not a high tariff country. And I think it's a move in the right direction.
Right.
Of course, one change relates to motorcycles. I think they're reacting to Trump and Harley Davidson.
Yes.
So in the lighter vein, I can make that comment now.
Absolutely. Very well said.
And so that's on the tax side. If you'd like me to comment a bit more on the policy side of things, then, I think they've announced the setting up of the National Manufacturing Mission. That is very important, given that China is losing, if you like, the love if you like, from many multinationals.
Yeah.
And they're looking at alternatives, and we want to be the China plus one. We've not managed to do a fantastic job of it so far. So I think this mission should help us focus on that, attracting more FDI into the country on that count for manufacturing. But also the focus on the MSME sector, because at the end of the day, job creation is going to be important. And almost 40% of the manufacturing in India, especially related to labor, high labor intensive jobs, come from the MSME sector. So there's a lot of focus there. She has upped the insurance FDI to 100% if you are willing to invest your premiums back in India. So that's a good move, and they're going to review some of the things to do with that. Some other things relate to bilateral investment treaties, again, to make India a more friendly destination for investments. Two treaties were signed since the announcement 6 months ago in July last year. But a very important move is the setting up of a high-level committee for regulatory reforms. And I think that is an excellent move, because even the economic survey says to the government, get out of the way, let business carry on in doing business. And this committee is expected to help us to have a light regulatory touch. And they're supposed to do all this, give us the recommendations in the next year. I hope this works well, because that will be really good if that happens.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, I'm going to pick up a few points, and let's start with this incredible change that has happened in the 12 lakh rupees tax-free income. One of the comments that she made was that she thinks that a very large number of people are paying taxes, and we seem to be going after just a small group of people. By exempting this, how are people benefiting, and how will the country benefit?
So I think this is a big move. Probably the biggest move in the budget is on discount.
Yeah.
There are something like 7.5 crore tax filers in the country. It is reported, because these numbers are not officially announced by the government, to the best of my knowledge, but about 3 crore people out of that actually pay tax. Now, this move is actually removing 1 crore more people out of the tax net.
Correct.
So you may have 7.5 crore tax filers, but it's only going to be around 2 crores of those who are going to end up actually paying taxes. So it's a huge move in that sense. What it does is the middle class up to 12 lakhs plus doesn't have to end up paying any tax, because theoretically the exemption limit is 4 lakhs, but right up to 12 lakhs plus there's a standard deduction, etc., and a few deductions available, which takes you well over 12 lakhs, and you don't have to end up paying taxes. You file a tax return, but you don't end up paying tax. I think it's a big move. But the key reason for this move is because we did see in one prior quarter the GDP growth rate fall to just 5.4%. I think that sort of shook the government a little bit. And what they're trying to do here is leave more money in the hands of, if you like, the middle class, the common man. And they're hoping to up the private discretionary spend. Now, that would be great, because that would then drive demand. And if demand goes up, I think private sector capex and investment will then go up. The government is been actually appealing, if you like, to the private sector to invest in capex, to invest in infrastructure and grow the capacity. That's not happened a lot. And I think this move is expected to finally result in the private sector taking part, and not just the government investing in capex and infra and so on.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. The next question is, then again, I was reading, and I only have a very broad understanding. You are the expert. But there's a lot of discussion going on the fiscal deficit target. It was last year, I think, at 4.8, 4.9%. This year, they're saying it's 4.4% GDP. And this is being done without really containing the spend on infrastructure. Tell me a little bit more about this, and how will this impact our country?
So this is another very important area, and I must commend the government on sticking to what they said 4 years ago. So in 2021, post-COVID, the finance minister had made a statement that we will make sure that we have a smooth glide path, and in the next 5 years, reduced the fiscal deficit, which then stood at 9.2%, very high post-COVID, to something less than 4.5%. She has now made a commitment to get this down to 4.4% next year. In FY25, it's estimated to be 4.8%, but next year it's targeted at 4.4%, which is below the mark. So they're living up to their commitments. That's a great sign, that they're actually following the FRBM Act, what has been laid out in detail in terms of fiscal responsibility, and getting to that goal. This is very important because this then creates more confidence in the country by foreign investors, by foreign rating agencies, and we then give an indication of economic stability and having things in control. Another important focus is that the government is not only trying to get the fiscal deficit down, but it's beginning to focus in a big way on the debt to GDP ratio.
Right.
Again, post-COVID, the central government's debt to GDP ratio was as high as 57-58%. And now it is being targeted that in the next few years, you will get this down to around 50%, maybe 49%, as it was pre-COVID, and then to move it down further. This is not easy, but the government, central government seems to be pretty much, trying to do this despite the huge spends that they're making on different policy initiatives, infrastructure in particular. Part or a significant part of the reason they're able to do this is huge bump up in the tax collections.
Correct.
Whether it's GST collections, whether it's personal tax collections, not just corporate tax, which have gone up hugely. So that's something to laud on the part of the government.
Fascinating.
There's something here that they have to be obviously very careful about is that when you add up the debt of all states and the center put together, then it's as much as 85%. So I think the states as well need to get into the act, get their act together, and really begin to focus on getting debt under control, not just give away freebies, etc., as we see some states doing. And perhaps they can drive it through more of the sort of NDA states, start there. But again, to do this, they're making one other very important comment here, and if I may just add that, they're actually going to have a sort of index, which is going to say how well states are doing on reforms and investments and so on. So that's a good sign because they're going to create some degree of competition amongst the states.
Amazing. Jay, you also spoke about the National Manufacturing Mission. Tell me a little bit more about how will this work? And then there is also a proposal to give 10,000 crores for startups. So talk to me a little bit about the National Manufacturing Mission and this fund of funds to help young entrepreneurs.
Right. So this is an important step that's been announced. The National Manufacturing Mission is expected to focus a lot on policy support, governance, monitoring framework for central ministries as well as states. So this is important. But the focus here clearly is also, as I said, on MSMEs. And the reason, as I explained earlier, is because that's where I think a lot of job creation is happening. If you read the economic survey, it says that 75% of new jobs are being created in the informal sector, not in the big corporates. So they are clearly focusing on this part. This mission is going to focus on a few things: the ease and cost of doing business. How are we making sure that we have a workforce which is ready for the future? To create a vibrant MSME sector. How can the MSME sector in particular avail of technology and technological changes that are happening, including AI? And the quality of products. Because, in the past, there have been some years ago that the MSME sector does not produce high quality products. So there is a degree of focus on the quality of products as well. Similarly, there is some talk again of clean tech manufacturing because India is clearly committed to climate change and to improve value addition on a sustainable basis. They have announced various changes with the focus on, if you like, turbines, high voltage transmission equipment, solar PV cells, etc. And also customs duty being cut on several things which should result in cheaper electric cars as well. So some of this focus is likely to drive, hopefully, much better manufacturing outputs.
Fantastic. Thank you. There's also a lot of focus on infrastructure and urban development. And the figure that I picked up was that, they're expecting to spend 1.5 crore interest-free loans to be given to states. Tell me a little bit more about how is this infrastructure development going to happen at the state level, and how will all this money flow?
So this is again, I think, a very forward-looking move. It was announced last year, but they're taking it forward this year. It's 1.5 lakh crores promised to the states by way of interest-free 50-year loans. This they're going to do provided the states show an inclination for reforms, to invest in capex, to invest in infra projects, and to incentivize them to get into public-private partnerships. This is another way to invite private investment into infra and capex. The reason why I think this is also being done is that under our constitution, there are only some things which are on the center's list. Correct. And some which are on the state list. So the central government has limitations ultimately in terms of how much it can invest in roads, because they can only do expressways and highways. They can do ports and airports, but some of this doesn't require that much, airports in particular, that much spend on the part of the government. It has limitations in terms of how much it will spend. Roads, we made great progress, and so they have to make sure that the states get involved. And to do that, they're actually saying that we are willing to give you these 50-year interest-free loans, provided you show the right direction. They're nudging them along in the right direction to spend on infra, to spend on sustainability, to spend on PPPs. So they're doing what they can at the central level, but it's the states who have to actually now get into the act and move this ahead forcefully.
Very interesting. There's also talk of a 1 lakh crore urban challenge fund.
That's right. Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about this one.
So the urban challenge fund is again something which is expected that to get to urban development, if you like. And what the government has been saying is that they need to focus on urban development as a key priority to drive transformative reform. So they want to use cities as growth hubs. They want to try and focus on sustainable and incentivize urban development, urban resilience, and avoid, moving in the direction of Viksit Bharat. Right. So it's a clear requirement that you've got the cities which they need and the urban areas which need to do a lot more if they're going to be more habitable, more sustainable, and more climate friendly. Right. So I think they're actually putting this into a huge fund, which is 1 lakh crore, as you mentioned, and hoping that this will drive the reform process along the urban lines.
A few minutes when we started our conversation, you spoke about the IT bill that is supposed to come out in about a week or so. And when I was hearing the budget speech, the finance minister said several times the new IT bill is coming next week. And this morning I was reading her interview, and she said she wants to make the IT bill 21st century compliant or something like that. Tell me a little bit about the importance of the IT bill, because I remember when I did my business school 40 years ago, it used to be Income Tax Act of 1961. And after that, God knows how many changes have happened. But how is the new IT bill important? And as an expert, what are some of your expectations?
So I think, first of all, the IT bill is expected very soon. Last year, it was announced that she will probably release it in 6 months. We had heard in our interactions with Northlog that was going a bit slow. Then there was a lot of push to make it happen, to live up to their commitment of what they had said. And in the last few months, I think a lot of effort has been put into it. And we are now going to see a new bill unfold probably in this week. We have an income tax law which was goes back to 1961 and was largely based on the 1922 Act.
I see.
So, we are, in a law which, applies and affects so many of us, crores and crores of us in the country. It's a law which is more than 6 decades old. It's a law which has got very complicated because they've been making hundreds of amendments almost every year. So, just as a tidbit, there are more than 1,400 provisos in the income tax law, which is about 300 sections. So you can read, imagine reading a section which says this, provided further, and so on and so on. It just makes life hell even for professionals to interpret it properly. So the goal was to try and make sure that we have something which is more rational, which is more simple, provides easy to understand. I know law is not, whatever you say is not always easy to understand. Correct. It can get complex because you have to take care of various situations. But the attempt is going to be to simplify, provide stability and certainty, rationalize. What I gather from discussions with the government is that this bill will be released, but she's keen, the finance minister is very keen that they pass it, if not in the budget session, certainly in the monsoon sessions. So they want to get onto a fast track on this. So I suspect it will be referred to a standing committee of parliament. They will take input from the public at large and from professionals. However, I think they're keen to make sure that they implement it ASAP. So it's very possible that we may see the light of day on this law very soon. I would welcome it. I hope they do rationalize it and bring it to current norms. So, clearly we need to have a law which takes into account what's happening around the world, which takes into account international tax developments. So much has changed with tax treaties, etc., in the last few years. But I don't think we should expect that there are going to be fundamental policy changes in this law. That will come through policy initiatives of the government, either through the budget, finance bill, or otherwise. But this one, we hope that is going to be really result in a much more simplified law.
Very interesting. So, Jay, I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is that, for the average human being, the reflection of a budget is in the stock market. So when the stock market shoots up on when the finance minister is speaking, the public assumes that it's a great budget. This time it didn't seem to do that. Tell me a little bit more about how does the market perceive this year's budget? And this would only be an opinion, obviously, from you.
True. But you're talking to the wrong person if it's capital markets.
I know.
But let me comment on that.
Yeah.
So, I think what happens is when everybody listens to the finance minister's budget speech, there are immediate reactions based on what they understand. When we actually get to reading the fine print, it may mean something a little different from what has been understood. Sometimes people misunderstand, on immediately hearing, and the market reacts. And then after a few hours, you really understand what it means when you go through the budget documents a bit more carefully. So I guess that's part of the explanation. Why the market went down and then sort of stabilized at the end of the day, I'm not the expert to talk on that. But at the same time, the fact is that it's not only India making changes that affect the capital market. There are also so much volatility around the world. Trumponomics is coming in and creating its own disruptions, and then you have a DeepSeek coming in and creating huge disruption just in the last few days. So there are lots of other factors. We are no more living in a ring-fenced world. We are really part of a connected world in that sense. So I would say that one needs to understand, analyze what the finance minister says. And the implications are different for different sectors, different classes of people, segments of the population, and so on. So it's only when you really grasp that you can then try and figure out how the market will react. But as I said, I'm just a layman at this.
But you've given a very important message to a lot of our viewers and listeners that don't react based on what you see. Educate yourself and then take an educated decision rather than just see which way the momentum is.
True.
And my last question for you, Jay, you have been analyzing budgets for many, many, many years, and your commentary is something that people look forward to every year. As you look at 2025 budget, what in your view are some of the more overlooked or underrated aspects of the budget that you would have liked to see?
So this is, my personal view, and I think there's been a lot of focus on MSMEs in the context of manufacturing, etc. But I think more could have been done in that context. Now, I know, we always want more. Whatever you get, you want more.
Correct.
But, there's the whole China plus one thing going on in the last year or so. And I'm not sure whether we've jumped onto the bus adequately. We really need to be able to attract much more FDI into the country. That's permanent investment into the country, dollars flowing into the country. It just creates a lot of confidence around the world.
Yeah.
And I think we need to see beyond tax or GST and so on, and really look at how to make India a very attractive, easy to do business type of destination. I was also a little disappointed that the manufacturing sunset clause, which came up last year, allowing the lower rate of tax of 15%, wasn't really extended. They did extend the sunset clause for several other things, like for startups, but not for manufacturing as such. And I would like to see a lot more focus on manufacturing, because that can be a huge provider of jobs as well.
Correct.
In that sector, because that gets you both. So they have focused on the MSME sector for this, but I think a little more could have been done.
Well said.
The second thing is, I think from a fiscal point of view, there is a lot happening, has been happening in the last 10, 12 years on the global international tax line. And we were a bit surprised that India has kept very silent on what is the global minimum tax, Pillar 2 regime, as it's called. Possibly it's because, again, the Trump administration seems to have almost backed out of it.
Right.
So maybe they're waiting and watching to see how this will actually evolve. But nothing much has been announced. There was an effort made at simplification of capital gains tax last year, and it's, I think, been done partially at least. But the complexity still remains quite significantly. So I hope as part of the reform, the new income tax bill that is being proposed, they try and simplify in the capital gains tax as well, a little more, because I think that's something which is going to be really important. But when you talk of simplification, one other big area which I think the government needs to focus on next is simplification of the GST law. I think is just creating a lot of confusion. When you have ambiguity, it leads to a lot of other things, which are not, entirely above board and so on. So it's these things which need attention. FDI reforms, I think there's a lot of scope for much more FDI reform to make sure that we attract the right degree of investment. So there are lots of things which can be done, but just a few of these that I thought could have been looked at better.
Great response. And on that note, Jay, I just want to say thank you so much for an incredible conversation on the budget 2025-26. I was expecting something really amazing from you, and I think you've far exceeded the amount of knowledge that you have given to all of us, thousands of viewers and listeners who will take away a lot of amazing inputs from you. I am going to ask people, if you have any questions, write to us and we will forward them to Mr. Purandare. Hopefully he'll have some time to be able to answer some of the questions. And I look forward to having you again soon to chat with us on the Brand Called You. Thank you again.
Thank you,
and good luck.
Thank you for those kind words, and happy to answer any questions which get thrown up. And maybe we'll talk again soon, because the income tax bill is around the corner.
Absolutely. Look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.